Fantastic.
How'd you going on that one anyway? Yeah. Well, that's great. Make sure I'm on here. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll tell you. Let me welcome you to Grace Life here in El Paso. Those of you who are here locally, we're just glad that you're with us today, as well as all those who are viewing us online around, literally around the United States and around the world. We're just glad that you're with us today. It's a good day to be here. It's a little bit chilly outside, although it's warming up. I hear we're supposed to have some sunshine by this afternoon. It's a little unusual for El Paso to have 3 days in a row where there's no sunshine, but it's cool. You know, I had good Thanksgiving and all that kind of stuff. It's a good day. We're just glad that you're with us. This is actually week number 3 of our series called Waking Up Dead. And in this series, what we're talking about is what happens to you after you die. I mean, everybody seems to have questions about what happens to you after you die. I think all of us kind of wonder, have some questions about that in one way or another. And as a matter of fact, whether you believe in life after death or not, and there's a lot of people that say that they don't believe that there's any life after death. But you know what? It seems like even with those who don't believe in life after death, we all still seem to have questions about those who have gone on before us. You know, where are they now? You know, are they watching over us? Are they, you know, or maybe there are guardian angels that they're the ones that's watching over us? All different kind of questions that come up. So let me ask you this question: how many of you have ever lost a loved one or a close family member? Yeah, I think probably all of us have lost somebody who is close to us in one way or another. We've all kind of been through that in one way, shape, or another, and it's kind of a difficult time in our lives, definitely. You know, over the last 33, 4, whatever years it has been as a pastor, I've done lots and lots of funerals. I've done a lot of weddings as well. But you know, I've done a lot of funerals, and some of them have been for very elderly people, very elderly people, and some of them have been for very, very young people as well. I've done them for, you know, teenagers who've been killed on the road. Matter of fact, up at Cuba one time, there was some kids that were driving over, and they were kind of racing and coming to the top of a hill and had a head on. And I don't know, there's 2 or 3 of them that were killed in the car. They were like 16 or 17 years old. Lots of stuff like that. You know, there's a lot of death around us. A lot of those bad things that seem to happen. And you know, one thing I've noticed about those occasions is that they're rarely happy occasions. So doesn't matter whether the person was, you know, had lived a very long life, or whether the person was very young when they died. Those occasions usually are not very happy occasions. On the other hand, I have done a handful of funerals where they have been specifically designed to be outright celebrations. You know, and I think really that's probably more like it should be, is more like a celebration, especially if you know where the person is going, the person went after they passed on. You know, that ought to be, it's more of a graduation than it is a sad occasion, even though the sadness that we feel is within we still feel that sadness within us. Which, in my mind, makes a lot more sense to just be a happy occasion in that sense. On the other hand, I've also found that the vast majority of the sadness that we feel, whether even on those occasions when it's specifically designed to be a celebration, knowing where the person went after they died, you know, the vast majority of us still feel that sadness, you know. And I found that the sadness that we actually feel is sadness for ourselves, not for them. It's a little bit difficult when you're in that particular position in your life to realize that at the moment, that the sadness that we feel is really for ourselves rather than the person who's going on. But, you know, if we can kind of keep that in our mind, it kind of helps us through that situation, because knowing that we're sad because of the loss of them, that they are no longer in our lives, that we are, you know, no longer able to enjoy them, that it makes it maybe in some ways a little bit easier. So, excuse me. So instead of the overwhelming sadness that we feel at a time like that, it's just ourselves that we're feeling sorry for. And it can be pretty lonely down here, can't it? I mean, it can be, and especially when somebody goes on that we've really enjoyed being with, or a family member, it feels like it's just really lonely down here because we've been left behind. On the other hand, during those times of loss, a lot of questions come up, and I'm speaking specifically of those times of loss within our own personal lives at that particular time, at the time of the funeral, within that whole realm of time. that we have a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions come up that we probably haven't thought of before, or didn't think about, or didn't really consider at any other time in our lives. But you know, when death comes home, when it hits close to home, then we begin to have some questions about those who have gone on before us, don't we? We start asking questions like, where are they now? And there's always questions about that. Well, I'm glad to be able to say that it's not up to me to say where they are. As when it comes to a funeral, doing a funeral, I never say, well, they're in one place or the other, unless I know for sure that they have said within their lives that they are born-again believers in Jesus Christ. If they have not ever professed Christ, it's still not my place to say where they are. I don't know. I really don't know, and neither does any of us know, because you don't know what happened within that person's life in the final moments of their life. They may have, at the last moment, said, hey, you know what? I was wrong. I spent the entire years of my life wrong, and I know that God exists. I know that Jesus is who He says He is. So we have questions. Where are they now? Are they the ones that are looking down on us right now? Are they seeing how sad we are at their loss? That's one of the problems. One of the things we sometimes think about is maybe they're watching us and seeing how sad we are now that they're gone, and especially in the case of a death of an infant, or a small child. Those are really, really difficult times, aren't they? Any of you have been through that, you know exactly what I'm talking about, And always the question comes up in a case like that: do babies or children go to heaven? Because especially a lot of times in certain religions, they say, well, the baby hadn't even been baptized yet, or hadn't been, dedicated yet, or things like that. Are they going to go to heaven, or are they not? Because that's a real concern for parents of small children. Well, since that seems to be the question that strikes closest to home with most of us, then whether we actually lost a small child or not, let me answer that question right up front. And I can answer that question unequivocally and say absolutely, without a doubt, yes, they absolutely do go to heaven and they're with the Lord when they die. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. Because before a child reaches the age of accountability, and that is different for every child, it's different for every person. And I'm including and the reason I say personally, because I'm including within that the realm of those who don't have the mental capacity to understand those kinds of things. They may be 40 years old and still have the mentality of a 4-year-old. So, I'm glad God gets to make those decisions, but I'm going to say that before the age of accountability, whenever that is, and it's different for every person, that before they have the ability to make a conscious decision for or against Jesus Christ, they absolutely do go to heaven. Okay? And that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether they've been baptized or not. It doesn't matter if they've been born into a Christian home or born in completely ungodly surroundings, godless surroundings, born of a legal marriage or rape or incest or test tube or whatever. Those are immaterial things when it comes to an individual and between them and God. Those mean absolutely nothing. They're absolutely nothing to do with that particular subject of what God, where they go after they die or when they pass on. They absolutely do go to heaven. Okay. So, and I think that's at least part of what Jesus meant when He said, over in Matthew, when He said that Jesus said, let the children come alone, and do not hinder them from coming to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. I think that's at least part of what He meant there. The other part of what He meant is that we must come as a child with total faith and total trust in Him. But at least part of that means is that those young children who are before that age accountability, He says, hey, that's what the kingdom of heaven is made up of, is children like these, and that's what we need to become like as well. Okay, so on the other hand, and let's kind of change subjects there for now at this point in time. On the other hand, one question that never seems to actually be asked out loud. I don't think I've ever heard anybody ask it necessarily out loud in a way that they're saying, I would like to know, is the idea that those loved ones who've gone on before us are now looking down on us, and they're watching over us every day. I don't think I've ever heard anybody ask that question when they were in that kind of a position. And the reason I think that I believe that's so is that the reason that question is never asked directly at a time like that, is because it's one of those assumptions that we like to make. It's one of those assumptions we like to make simply because it makes us feel better about losing a loved one. Or maybe because we want them to know, we want them to be able to see how sad we are at their passing. Make sense? There's a lot of different ideas that I think come into play there when we think about those kinds of things. So is that true? We need to ask that question. Is that true? Are our loved ones who've gone on before us, are they watching over us? Are they looking down on us? Are they up there viewing our lives, maybe cheering us on or protecting us from harm, or maybe making noises in the house so that we know that they're around, or encouraging us to run this race with endurance so that we can eventually make it into heaven and spend the rest of eternity with them? Is that what they're doing? Is that what it's about? Actually, the place where most people probably get this idea, this is my opinion, I think the place that people probably get this idea is from a misunderstanding of what the writer of Hebrews says in Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 1. And there it says, "Therefore, since we have such as are so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us." Okay, so I've highlighted the cloud of witnesses because that seems to be kind of one of those ideas that we have in our minds sometimes about those who have gone on before us, as they are this great cloud of witnesses that are up there, that they are witnessing or viewing our lives, and they're watching over us, and they're cheering us on, and they're doing all these different kind of things. So we like to believe that I think it's a misunderstanding of that verse, of course, but that's what we like to kind of believe, is that's what people are doing. They've gone on before us and are looking down from heaven and observing us and seeing what we're doing and how things are going in our lives, and watching over us and running by our side and protecting us from danger and watching our every move, and hoping that we'll make the right choices, and all those different kind of things that we like to think about. I understand the thinking. I understand the thought process, because they're a loved one. We know that they care for us. They know that they love us, right? Or they did when they were here. That we were close to them. That we depended on them. They depended on us. All those different kind of things. So in the human mind, it makes sense to say, well, maybe they're still, watching over us now that they're in that spiritual realm. They have this power to be able to watch over us and guard us and guide us and walk along with us and all those different kind of things. So while I would certainly agree that at a time of loss, we look for comfort anywhere we can find it. That's human nature. We're going to look for comfort anywhere we can find it. And the idea that our loved ones are looking down from heaven, kind of watching over us and near us in some way, is one of those things that we like to believe. But I got to tell you, it is found nowhere in the Bible. The Bible never says any such thing at all, in any way, shape, or form. I understand the idea behind that. I understand the desire to think that our loved ones are there watching us and near us and all those different kind of things, but nowhere in the Bible is there any indication that that's the case. So I want you to take a special notice of the very first word in Romans chapter 12 and verse 1. It's that word, therefore. Okay? Because that keeps us from misunderstanding what's being said afterward. Right? The word therefore is that kind of a connecting word that means now, all the things that I've just said, this is the conclusion of that. Okay? Therefore, in other words, if you're saying a whole bunch of stuff, you're laying all the groundwork and all those different kind of things, and you say, therefore, here's the answer to everything I've just said, right? And I could say that right now. You know, we've just talked about all the great cloud of witnesses that we like to believe is there, and our loved ones are watching over us, and they're caring for us, and they're running beside us, and all the other kind of things. You know, but that's not what the Bible says. Therefore, this is what the Bible does say. Okay? The conclusion about that, so that's what the writer of Hebrews is doing. I think it's Paul. You can draw your own conclusions. I think Paul is the writer of Hebrews. It never doesn't say anywhere. Doesn't specifically say who the writer of Hebrews is, but my personal opinion is Paul. I have some reasons for that. So the word therefore just simply means that what he's about to say is a conclusion of what he just said. So the question is, what did he just say? Right? We need to figure out what he just said. Well, the fact is, the 11th chapter of Hebrews, the chapter just before, this is 12:1, all of Hebrews chapter 11 is sometimes known as the Faith Hall of Fame. It's known by other names as well, but the Faith Hall of Fame, because there's lots of people in there that are listed who lived lives of faith in Jesus Christ, right, in God. It's dedicated to all the Old Testament people who had not backed down from their faith in God, no matter what the circumstances were, no matter what happened to them while they lived here on this earth. Okay? For example, it says, by faith, even though it was against all human logic, Abel offered a better sacrifice than Cain. You know, it looked like, and if you know the story of Cain and Abel, it looked like a really logical thing. You know, Abel was the person who was a tender of flocks and herds and those kind of things. Cain was the guy who tended the field. So it would seem that a sacrifice for him would come from the field. Well, it was all against all human logic, but I think they both knew what it was supposed to be. And so anyway, by faith, it says that certainly Abel offered a better sacrifice. By faith, Noah built an ark, even though it had never rained on the earth before, and God simply said, hey, there's going to be a worldwide flood. You better build yourself an ark. You know? After that point, it had never even rained on the earth, much less come a flood, right? So that took a lot of faith to spend that, however long it was, year and a half, I don't know how many years it was that Noah took to build that ark. I didn't even look that up. I should have. Abraham. It says that by faith, Abraham packed up and left home. He didn't even know where he was going. God said, pack up and leave. You know, where am I going? I'll tell you. I'll show you where to go. So by faith, he just simply packed up and left home and went and ended up where God led him to go. By faith, Moses' mother, his mother disobeyed the direct command of Pharaoh and hid Moses in the swamp against the Pharaoh's direct command, right? And then Moses, by faith, when he grew up, by faith Moses refused to be known as the Pharaoh's son, even though he was raised as the Pharaoh's son, and he had all of everything at his disposal as the Pharaoh's son. You're rich, you're famous, you're powerful, all those kind of things. And he denied that and chose instead to be counted along with the people of God, even though it meant being thrown out of the Pharaoh's house and becoming a peon, right? By faith, the Bible tells us, Hebrews tells us that the children of Israel passed through the Red Sea. By faith, Rahab. How many of you know who Rahab was? She was a harlot or a whore, a prostitute, right? And she hid the Israelite spies and saved herself and her family from certain death in Jericho. As a matter of fact, she's one of those that's found in the family tree of Jesus, as listed in Matthew, quite interestingly, right? And there's lots and lots and lots of others. As a matter of fact, at the end of Hebrews, in Hebrews chapter 11, he says, and there are many, many more, which we don't have time to name here and to talk about here, but there's lots of nameless other people that we don't even hear about in the Bible, we didn't know about in the Bible, who lived the same way, had lived a life of faith in God and refused to back down for any reason and lived their lives in faith in Him, right? So what's happening here is that all of these people, and thousands and thousands and thousands more just like them, are given as examples to us. They're not up there watching us. They are not the cloud of witnesses either, in the sense that they are. I was taught that. in a denominational setting, that's who they were. They were up there in heaven watching us and watching over us and all those kind of. They were the cloud of witnesses that were up there and cheering us on and making sure that trying to make sure we make the right decision, all those kind of things. But that's not it. They're simply given as examples to us of how they lived lives of faith in God and did not lean on their own understanding. It's easy for us to lean on our own understanding, isn't it? It's easy to look at things logically and say, well, this is the way it has to be, even though God may say something different. Because the fact is, because all of them lived lives of faith in God knowing, and here's the most important part, all of them lived lives of faith in God knowing that God was the one who was directing their steps. God is the one who was watching over them. God is the one who is protecting them and running by their side and cheering them on and holding them up and giving them the strength and the courage to make the right choices. You see the difference? A lot of times we like to believe that it's either the great cloud of witnesses as listed in Hebrews chapter 11, or all those people have gone on before us and they're witnessing our lives and cheering us on and watching over us and all those different kind of things. Or we like to bring it down to a more personal matter, and we like to say, well, the loved ones that have gone on before us who love us and want to protect us and want to watch over us and want us to make the right decisions. I know that Dad would want me to do this or do that, right? And I know that He's there watching, making sure I make the right choices. We want to believe that because it makes us feel better. But that's not the case. It is God who is the one who is directing our steps, is directing our steps. He's the one who is protecting us and watching over us and cheering us on and holding us up and picking you up and dusting off your bottom and telling you to go on, right? God's the one who does that, not our loved ones who've gone on before us. Okay, look at it this way. Maybe this will help to make it a little clearer. All of us probably have someone in our lives that we have looked up to in the past, right? Or maybe are looking up to now. We all have somebody who is kind of our hero, someone we respect greatly, maybe someone who helped us through our lives or helped us to get a good start in life. Or I've got people in my life that are like that. I could tell you about a guy by the name of George Rost who's been gone for many, many, many years now. But he was the one that got me my first job, my first real job with the U.S. government, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He was, he came to my house one time. He said, hey, are you looking for a job? I said, no, I got a job. I was 19 years old. So I said, no, I got a job. I don't need a job. I was working for the Albuquerque Public Schools, as a welder and building fences and stuff like that. And I said, no, I don't need a job. And he said, well, how about this? How about if I just come over to your house sometime and tell you about it? And you can decide. Well, he came to my house and told me about it, and I said, wow. That's something I've wanted to do since I was too little to know better. Seriously. And along with that story, I've just got to tell you that God let me do what I always wanted to do. I did that for 10 years. That's what I always wanted to do. And then He called me in the ministry and He said, okay, cool. You've done it. You got that to look at. Now let's go on. Or I could tell you about Pastor Ray, who I was up to see just last week? Week before, last week. Lee and I went up to see him. He's my pastor. He's a guy I call my pastor. Even though we don't see eye to eye on Big G Grace, that's cool. He's the one that I actually surrendered to ministry when I was in his church, and I was ordained under him, and he taught me. He showed me how to do my first funeral, my first wedding, all the first sermon, all that stuff. I just scared the bejeebers out of me, when I was back then, And he's 92, fixing to be 92 in February. He's got lung cancer, and he's doing great. I had to go see him because you just don't know, I can tell you about a lot of people like that. You know, I'd like to believe that it would be a nice thought to think that when they pass on, that they're watching over. But we all have heroes like that. And I like to think of it in this sense, in a more general sense, and that, you know, you can look at our military veterans, right? Those are important people. If you don't know one personally or have one in your family, you know of someone who is. Someone who maybe died in the military. They died because of your freedom. Right? They went and they fought and they died. Or they were wounded. We got a lot of wounded veterans around us. Right? How many thousands upon thousands of people have served in the armed forces to preserve our freedom? How many of those people can you actually know by name? Well, we know the famous ones, right? We probably know some of the famous ones, like Douglas MacArthur, you know, a 5-star general worked from World War II, or General Patton, who also was in World War II as the U.S. commander during the Second World War, and Dwight Eisenhower, yeah, a 5-star general who was Supreme Allied Commander for the D-Day invasion of Europe, right? We know the famous ones, but we also know some who came from our own neighborhoods, or maybe from our own family. Yeah. And in the same way that our veterans have fought and died for our personal freedom, we can look to their service and their willingness to die for our freedom as motivation for our own, right? We don't look to them and say, well, they're still protecting us. We look to them and say, I want to be like him, you know, or her. I want to be that kind of a person. They're an example for us. So there's also this great cloud of faithful believers who have lived before us. Whether they're famous or not, doesn't matter. Who have left us this legacy of faith. They have shown us that faith in God is what's important. Not faith in them. Faith in God. Of what living a life of faith in Jesus Christ actually looks like. Right? We look at their lives and we say, man, now, even in the tough times, even in the hardest times of their life, they still look to Jesus to guide and to direct and to protect in their lives. And we say, I want to be like that. That's what Hebrews 11 is about. Saying, look back at these people. Look back at the people in your own life who have lived lives of faith in Jesus Christ. Okay, one last thing we need to understand at this point. I find it interesting that the original word translated as witnesses in Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 1 is actually the very word from which we get our English word martyr. Yeah, it's the exact same word. So I got to wondering, okay, maybe the witnesses then is the wrong, maybe it should say martyrs, those who have died for Christ, you know, in ages past. Maybe that's what you're really talking about there. What I found out is that's not the case. It's actually the word witnesses. That's what martyr means, is a witness. Now, the problem is because they were, the majority of us, even though the word martyr simply means witness, just exactly like it's translated here, sometimes, but not always, a witness may be killed for their refusal to change their beliefs, right? Or change their story. In other words, being killed for your faith is nothing more than a byproduct of our refusal to deny what we already know to be true. So we all are witnesses, and whether we died, a quote unquote martyr's death, we die a natural death. We still are martyrs in that sense. Because we all are witnesses of what Christ has done for us, right? Or we should be. That's what our lives are. That each of you, as you live your life of faith in Jesus Christ, you are a martyr. Quite honestly, quite seriously. Whether you die for your faith or not doesn't make any difference. Because the word martyr simply means witness. And we have extended that to mean that those who have died because of their faith, those are the martyrs. The rest of us are just regular common people. No, that's not true. Yeah, in the English language, that's what it's come to mean. But in the original Greek, that's not what it meant. Original Greek, it simply meant those who died continuing to believe, right? Who lived lives of faith in Jesus Christ. Whether they were killed for their faith or not makes no difference. None at all. So you are a martyr. Right now. Hallelujah. Makes it pretty important, doesn't it? It does. It gives you a whole different idea, a whole different outlook on how you live your life before others around you as well, right? If you are a martyr already, it's our refusal to change our story. Because we know what we know, what we know to be the truth. How can you lie about that, right? Yeah. Yeah. I heard about a church where Satan suddenly appeared before this small country congregation, and everyone started screaming and running from the building, and tearing their hair out and all that kind of stuff, except for one old feller on the front row, and he just sat there, and Satan walked up and said, "Don't you know who I am?" He said, "Yep, I sure do." And he said, "Well, aren't you going to run?" "Nah. No, I sure ain't." "Well, why aren't you afraid of me?" "Man, I've been married to your sister for 38 years.
You're bad.
Yeah, I know, I'm bad. Yeah, well, you see, the reason the Bible tells us not to get hung up on things like loved ones watching over us, the reason the Bible never mentions anything like that, as a matter of fact, it talks about things just the opposite. It talks about not trying to contact those who've gone on before us, is because all that does, the only thing that does, when we take that side of the picture and saying, well, loved ones are watching over us, they're caring for us, they're running beside us, they're pulling for us, all that kind of thing, the only thing that does is causes us to take our eyes off of Jesus. And that's exactly what Satan wants us to do. He wants us to put our eyes on anything else other than Jesus. Doesn't matter. Whether it's religion, whether it's your loved ones, whether it's your family, whether it's, whatever. Doesn't matter. A bazillion things. Doesn't matter. Anything and everything else. He'd rather have you put your eyes on that than to keep your eyes on Jesus. So let's do as what the writer of Hebrews tells us in Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 2. We just read verse 1. In verse 2 he says, fixing our eyes on... I always get in trouble when I say fixing. How many of you get in trouble for saying fixing? Am I the only one that says fixing? I'm fixing to go here, fixing to go there, right? What do you mean fixing? You're fixing to do what? Yeah, well, it's right here, okay? Except this means to fix, to concentrate your vision, your heart, your life. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter or finisher of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. Right? He said, there's our ultimate. Even though we have all of chapter 11 as our great cloud of witnesses that say, Jesus is the way, right? And they're all pointing to this. They're all pointing to this and saying, keep your eyes on Jesus, because he is the one who guides and directs and protects and all those different kind of things. He is the ultimate witness, ultimate martyr, who says, do what I do. Do what I do. Keep the faith. Don't deny what you know to be true. Well, if you know in your heart of hearts that it's true, you're not going to be able to deny it anyway. No. God's awesome. And he's saying, listen, keep your eyes on me. You know, keep your eyes on me. And everything will be cool. When I first, Pastor Ray, I'll come back to him for just a second, just one last little thing. When he's the one that kind of got me started and helped me along, I should say. I'd already started playing the 5-string banjo before I met him, and then when I met him, he said he was an old bluegrass guy, you know, from back over in Arkansas, and he said, "Man, we got to get together." Of course, I wasn't very good at all. And so I played along with him a lot. And so I was concentrating on playing the banjo, and I'd forget the words. And so he'd say, "Watch my lips." So I did. I watched his lips all the time to make sure I got the right words, you know. And that's what Jesus is saying. Keep your eyes on me. Watch me. Watch me. Watch me. You won't have to worry about the rest, right? God's awesome. We're blessed.